Hello there, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 6, whether you're watching on YouTube, Google Plus, or elsewhere. Tonight, each of our guests has picked a topic for us to debate, and they will introduce their topic, and then we will debate it. In a few moments, I'm going to introduce each of them, but we want to hear your views, and we want you to send in your questions, or points, or facts, or challenge to each of our guests during the debate. You can do so using the hashtag SpectrumDebate, singular, or if you're watching on Google+, you can use the Q&A feature, and I'll do my best to put your questions and points to our guests and to let all of our viewers know what it is that you are thinking. If you are watching on Google+, you can also use the Applause app, which is the equivalent of the worm that you might have seen in debate shows elsewhere, and that tells us how much you agree or disagree with what is being said at any particular time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests to you and find out what their topics are. Our first guest tonight is David Jeffrey. He's a PhD student at the School of Politics and International Relations at Queen Mary London University. He hails from Liverpool, good old Scouse lad like myself. David is a Conservative supporter, and outside politics he's interested in running and baking, and you can tweet him at DavidJeffrey_. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Gareth.
And your topic briefly?
Universal basic income and whether it's feasible and desirable in the UK.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is Thomas Hoof. He's 24, he's the National Deputy Chairman of Young Independents, which is the youth wing of UKIP, the party that he supports. He stood in by-elections for his party, and tonight he's broadcasting from Telford, which is his hometown, and you can tweet him at ThomasHoof1. Good evening, Thomas.
Good evening.
And what's your debate topic tonight?
I'll be talking about a need for an English Parliament.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next guest is Ian Johnson. He holds the honour of having the favourite Twitter handle of Spectrum Debate's recent guests, and so due to popular demand, he's here joining us tonight from Cambridge, where he does his best to investigate those aspects of politics which confuse him. He is not a supporter of any particular party, and you can tweet him at the legendary Twitter handle at @aconfusedninja. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening.
And what's your topic tonight?
Tonight I'm going to be talking about House of Lords reform and why I think we need it, and I think possibly suggesting different ways that many people haven't heard of before.
Wonderful, thank you very much indeed. And last but by no means least, you'll be used to him now, it's Matthew Hulbert. He's a Lib Dem councillor in Leicestershire, twice shortlisted for Lib Dem Councillor of the Year. He's on the left of his party. Matthew is also prominent in a variety of campaign groups such as Compass and Republic, and you can find him on Twitter at HulbertMatthew. Good evening, Matthew.
Hi there, Gareth. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. What is your topic for tonight?
Yes, my topic tonight is Black Friday and commercialism in an age of austerity, and whether people are replacing their need for a belief in politics with going slightly crazy for a bargain.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And hello to you all again. I'm Gareth, I'm your host, and for full disclosure I am a Conservative, but I will do my best to play devil's advocate and to challenge all of our guests tonight. But don't forget, our standard disclaimer is that whilst our guests may well support or be in a party, none of them speaks for or on behalf of any party, so please take everything they say tonight as being their own personal opinions. And if you'd like to appear here in future weeks, get in touch. It's really simple. We've got a waiting list for a couple of parties, but several others we'd welcome you to come on, and we'd like as many of you, whatever your political views, to join us. We're going to begin by asking our first guest, who was drawn at random before the show, to open their topic, and using the random laser name generator, the winner of that was Thomas, who's going to open up on the need for an English Parliament. Thomas.
Well, I believe that we should have an English Parliament and move to a full federal UK. The reason being we have current massive disparity in the UK of democracy, where Scottish MPs can vote on English laws and Welsh MPs can vote on Welsh laws. Welsh MPs can vote on English laws, but not the vice versa because of the assemblies, and I believe that makes a strong case for having an English Parliament.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, who'd like to put in their two penneth to begin with?
I will. I think problem with an English Parliament is the fact that the Parliament that we have now is sufficient. I don't think people want more politicians. I know I don't. And the fact that England represents such a huge amount of the population of the UK seems that it'd be a very unfair federal structure. What I'd like to see instead is county councils and big cities getting more power, being able to devolve more of what central government does, bringing it closer to the people. That is currently far, far removed and as far as it should be.
That's quite an important point, isn't it, Thomas? I'll come back to you straight away. Do we really want, in this time of anti-politics, more politicians, as it would be in the case of England, hundreds more?
Well, I understand that, but I think if it was based on counties and you had county assembly members or something similar rather than the regionalisation or giving cities more powers, if you give cities more power, it'll just end up in the hands of mayors, which people voted against in a referendum not so long ago.
Right. Matthew, do you have any point on this?
Yeah, I mean, all I was just going to say is that I certainly would support more powers for local councils, and even taking it down a stage further to parish and town councils as well. But on the point of an English Parliament, I think if we were to have one of them, and I think, you know, it's arguable, but there could potentially be a case for an English Parliament, you wouldn't necessarily need a whole new layer of politicians. You could just use Westminster. And have a situation where it's just the English MP. So I'm just making the factual point of saying that you wouldn't necessarily need a whole new layer of politicians.
Is that the same as English votes for English laws, or are you suggesting that MPs elected from English constituencies should have a dual mandate?
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a new parliament, would it really, in that case? It would be a situation of English votes for English laws. Now, I know that's slightly different, but connected to what we're debating. I think we would see then two layers of MPs. But I also think, how long will folks in England accept a situation where, as has been said, you know, the other constituent parts of the country can vote on our laws, but we can't vote on theirs? I mean, it's clearly not fair.
Right, Ian, there's been an awful lot of partisan politics going on over this, with different parties coming forward with different ideas, whether it's devolution to local councils, city regions, or England, or none at all. How do you, as someone from outside that, view this topic?
I think my biggest point on this would be that if we keep devolving the way we do piecemeal, bit at a time, a drip here to Manchester, a bit here to Yorkshire, a bit here to Lancashire, we're going to have a very uneven democracy. We need to actually build a proper structure for devolution rather than what we have now, with Scotland having significantly more democratic representation than England, but yet it's them that we're talking. It's always sort of them that we're talking about. And if we don't put the effort into finding a way to give everybody, or to spread this out fairly across the community, all we're going to do is do devolution by anger. Which community gets the most angry about not having something, rather than devolution as a fairness for everybody.
Okay, now we've had a few comments on this one so far. I mean, there's a debate going on. Some people quite proud that Telford's being mentioned. So
I'm putting Telford on the map.
There you are. So there you are. Thank you, and for Adam, but you're only the second person from Telford though, who's been on. Adam Hawkes was our first at the Adam Hawkes. So Telford has been quite well represented so far. John Mousey's telling us here, he's another former guest, we should have an English Parliament now. As fun as old English kingdom parliaments would be, an English Parliament as a whole is easier. Let me put a point to you that some in the Labour Party are making, and this is to whoever who'd like to answer it, that actually England is so big, devolving power from Westminster to England is fairly pointless, and what we need is some sort of regional government instead. Surely that would be closer to the people and more democratic. Anyone?
No, absolutely not. No.
Tell us why.
Here in Telford, the views, and not just the political opinions, but demographic, lifestyle, types of work in, say, the Black Country, or as far as Coventry, if you were to do something in the West Midlands, their views are that it might as well be Barbados if you're going to try and regionalise this as like a single group of people, because you have such a diverse set of like local cultures even. I just think regionalisation is a poor way of breaking up England. And I think if you do go down the route of trying to create a regional structure in the UK, even more than that they already have tried, I think that would actually just lead to a rise in English nationalism and possibly force a break in the UK altogether.
Okay, anyone else on that point?
Yeah, I mean, can I just ask Thomas a question in response to that? What does he think about the fact that I was seeing on the news the other day, because Hinckley, where I am in Leicestershire, is on the East Midlands, West Midlands border. It's officially East Midlands, but we're very near Nuneaton and parts of Warwickshire. And so I was watching the West Midlands news, and they were talking about this new some of the local authorities around the Birmingham area coming together and creating this one massive authority. And I must admit, from outside of that area, I couldn't really necessarily see the benefits of that. I mean, how do you think places like Telford would play into that kind of big structure?
Well, I think there'd be massive outrage if we were even included in some sort of kind of greater Birmingham council. Telford and Wrekin as a local authority left as a unitary council from Shropshire County Council because the people wanted more devolved local powers. And I think if we try to ram everyone into this bigger, greater Birmingham structure, they'd be outraged.
Okay, David, one of the places that the government and the opposition both seem to put a lot of weight on is our home city of Liverpool, and talking about having a Liverpool city region. Obviously, they push the concept of an elected mayor there with Mayor Joe Anderson, no relation. What's your view on that? I mean, how would Liverpool's neighbours react to an expanding city region based on Liverpool?
For a start, they're already trying to do something like that. They do have a combined system, but it's in its very early stages. But the problem is, the leaders can't agree on anything. They're used to running their councils as kind of with these dictatorial tendencies almost, where votes are just a formality. Cooperation across councils is kind of frowned upon as imposing on different people's patches. It took them about 4 months to decide a name.
Yeah, I remember that.
Liverpool would be unfair to people who aren't, whereas Merseyside doesn't have that same international recognition that Liverpool does. So I don't hold out a lot of hope for increased power sharing between councils on a regional level in our neck of the woods. Not to say it can't be done, and I think Manchester is an excellent point of what a city can do if it gets its civic leadership right. And sadly, at the moment, that's something Liverpool's lacking.
Thank you. A few more comments from our what do we call them? Viewers, our participants at home. Gavin at Blue Liberal 1 is saying that an English Parliament wouldn't bring power closer to the people. Cameron S at Cameron_surname. Voter apathy is too high for another Parliament. English MP only days at Westminster seems preferable. Adam Hawke says that devolution needs to be handled carefully. We may end up with a case where no region has policies or laws that match. I mean, the case you're talking about, Matthew, where you are right on the border of the West Midlands and the East Midlands, if you ended up with different tax rates between the two, where would people pay their income tax? And what if it's at different rates between the two, or local sales taxes and that kind of thing? How might that work?
But there are positives. I absolutely see that could be a problem, Gareth. But there are positives from being in a position like we are in the Hinckley area as well. Because, for example, we are, thanks to the good work of Lib Dem and Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, we are going to benefit from being in the Leicester and Leicestershire City deal, and indeed the Coventry and Warwickshire City deal. So we are looking to benefit from both of those city deals. So being in a strategic position like we are can be a benefit in that respect. I think on balance of it, I'd rather not see an English Parliament, but I do think there should be more powers for county, district, and indeed parish and town council.
The problem with that, though, is, Matthew, the problem with that is the English people as an identity have no one to represent them, and they do feel, and it creates animosity between the Welsh, Scottish, and English. And if the English people do not get a voice, I think it will end in tears, and the UK will break up. But the English people deserve a voice.
But do you really think, Thomas, that we don't have a voice? I mean, come on, we're the biggest representative parts of this United Kingdom. I mean, we do have a voice.
Doesn't it
Well-
matter though, Matthew, when big policies such as tuition fees in England only and changes to the NHS and NHS structure are only put through by the votes of MPs from Scotland? I use my words carefully here because they're not necessarily Scottish, but they're MPs from Scotland.
Yeah.
Does that not matter that they can actually be decisive in what happens in England, even if a majority of MPs from England were to vote against something?
Well, I mean, I'll be absolutely honest with you, Gareth. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm sceptical about English votes for English laws, although it makes sense, is because, you know, I'd rather not see perpetual Tory majority rule in England. You know, I quite like that our colleagues from Scotland and Wales help to balance it out. I don't think perpetual one-party rule in any place is good, and certainly not in England.
Isn't the answer to that just to get more votes?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it might be a bit hard, Matthew, for the Liberal Democrats at this point in time to complain about anyone else having a majority of any sort, because how many majorities do you think the Liberals might have by May next year?
I think it's currently looking as if we shall remain a significant force in Parliament after next May.
I just thought
Matthew's obviously had a bang on the head.
I just thought Ian.
Well, we'll have more MPs than you'll have, Thomas.
Okay, well,
we'll
we might come back to that one, Ian. Before we get into a party spat.
I was more going to go down the line of even if we do devolve powers, if we push more powers to local councils, to county councils, to these larger cities and things like that, we are going to need potentially a better quality of politician in these areas. That no offense to a lot of the councils. I know a few councils who are very passionate about what they do, but we can't have these. We can't have, as people have said, it seems like planning applications or various other things that the councils deal with at the moment go through on the nod, and we don't really seem to. People don't have trust at the moment in their local councils compared to the main parties, and so we would need to sort of push that a little bit more and get better quality of politician in there.
We've had this issue before, actually, in terms of the Scottish Parliament, haven't we? People have been talking in particular about the Labour Party's MSPs not being up to scratch. But from one councillor to another, Matthew, would you agree that that is actually an issue in local government?
Well, I think in the British Parliament you can see some people who you could argue are maybe not as impressive as others from across the parties. So, you know, I think at whatever level of representation you find that. I mean, I'll be honest, in my experience of a few years of being on a council, yes, you do think some people are more impressive and more capable than others. I don't quite know what you do about that, though. I mean, if parties are selecting them and they're being elected, what do you do about that?
I would partly say, though, that a lot of our councils, probably the ones that have the worst reputations, tend to be single-party councils, tend to be where they are single-party states. And I think that we should probably get away from change the electoral system for councils at that point to actually make it so that it's more proportional proportionally representative of the people in that region.
Okay, we've got some really good comments coming in here. Let me try and go through a few because there are quite a lot. We've got some comments in here that saying both Telford and Hinckley are really nice, and someone reminding us that Bosworth has always been an important position in the country. History references, we like that.
Quite right.
Yes. John Mousey's telling us that he could do without the Midlands being run from Birmingham for all eternity, if he's honest. Joe Pattinson, at Joe_Pattinson, the structure of local government and the devolution that we currently have means that we have power that's unbalanced. And David mentions leaders running local councils almost dictatorially. Can we have a shout out for a certain leader in York who has just stood down? We'll not go into that one. Ben Walker is asking who the hot one is. I think, David, that was referring to you.
Oh.
We've got Cameron S saying that voter. Oh, I've already read that one out.
How do you know it was referring to David?
Yeah, absolutely.
David was talking. David was talking at the time. I think. Yes, I've read those ones. I'm trying back to read my retweets. Will Bates is telling us that at William Bates UK, all situations with the West Lothian question are very unsatisfactory. English votes for English laws makes government unstable. Cami Singh, Cameron Singh CL, hello again, Cami. I would like federalism, but realistically, people do not want more political institutions. Many want a simpler structure. Any final comments? I'll retweet the others that are on here. We're not going to have time to read them all out, but any final comments from anyone before I ask Thomas to close this debate?
Yeah, I can go with just, I'd like to see a more structured federal UK, and I don't think that we're going to be able to say that we can have an English Parliament. I think we're going to have to say we're going to have to break it down by regions, maybe not counties, but maybe break it down across regions.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I mean, I'd quite like to see, one of the things that I liked, one of the few things that I liked about Gordon Brown's government was the idea of, and I know it's debatable whether they were successful or not, but I quite like the idea of them, of regional ministers, of ministers being specifically responsible for representing a region within cabinet, so that regions did have a cabinet voice. I don't know what other people feel about that. We may not have time now, but I quite like that idea.
Thank you. No, we don't have time to discuss that, Matthew, but thank you for that one. David, anything before I ask Thomas to close?
Well, I was just going to say on the point of regional cabinet members, Michael Heseltine in Liverpool did such a good job that he's got the key to the city, or he's maybe not loved, but he's the closest thing we've got to a popular Tory, myself excluded, obviously. And I think that, he can have positive outcomes. The last one that we had for Liverpool was Chris Grayling. Put a bit less effort in, and that showed.
Yeah, less said, the better on that one, I think. From my own point of view, I detest the idea of regional assemblies. Certainly, I'm from Liverpool. I live in Cheshire. The idea that we're in the same region and have anything more in common with, hill farmers in Cumbria or people who live in Bolton than we do with people who live in Shropshire or Telford is balmy. And I think there should be parity between the nations. How precisely you do that with an English Parliament, whether, frankly, you could, joining in perhaps another topic we're going to talk about, you could scrap the House of Lords and have that as a federal single unicameral chamber and the House of Commons as the English Parliament. It's just an idea I throw out there, but maybe we'll come back to that one. That's my pennoth. Thomas, to close, your turn.
Well, I'd just like to smash the regional argument out first, because as I went back to my original point, as someone just put on Twitter, prime example, Shropshire as a whole, agricultural, Telford, industrial, these regional ministers won't work. On terms of an English Parliament, or let's say English votes for English laws, if an English MPs are recalled to vote on finances in a certain department, well, that vote could result in a change to the Barnett formula, and therefore Scottish MPs would argue that would affect them. So it would be too difficult for them to work at a system of like two-tiered system of MP. I just don't think it's viable, and I think that just increases the need for an English Parliament where English people can be represented directly.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got a short question here for you all to think of, which is, this is from John Mousley again. Since it's Churchill's birthday, what is the panel's favourite Churchill quote? We'll come back to that later on, so get thinking, or Googling, whichever you prefer. Using the laser...
Mine now if you want.
No, calm yourself, because you make the rest of us look unprepared. Using the laser selection system, let's see who's next, and it is Matthew.
Gosh. Hello. Okay, right. So we saw the slightly crazy scenes on Friday of Black Friday, which I believe, from my limited knowledge of it, is something that's come over here from America, that they have Thanksgiving and then they have this Black Friday when lots of goods are cheaper and there's lots of bargains. But some of the scenes were crazy on Friday of people just going balmy for these, not really bothering about what they were buying, or and trying to take things off other people that had already picked them up and all the rest of it. And I just thought maybe the answer to this is no, but I just wondered whether there was something more beyond it than just people wanting bargains, and whether actually there's something to do with the age of austerity and having had such a long period of time where people had very little money in their back pockets. And I know that goes on now, and where services are constantly being cut the whole time, that actually people are kind of grasping for something to hold on to. And even if as silly as it sounds, that might be having a day going crazy at the shops. And so maybe I am reading more into it than what should be done, but I'm interested in the views of the other panel members as to whether they think people feel that politics has let them down and that they're trying to grasp onto something, even if it's having a wild day at the shops.
Okay, I'll see if who'd like to speak on that first. One thing I'd add at this point is certainly in Germany they have very strict laws when it comes to sales. So it's very hard to find offers. You go into a supermarket or a shop here, and there are 3 for 2s and things all over the place. Very, very hard to find such things in Germany because they ban them. And sales in Germany are very rare and take a very different form. And I don't know. Obviously, there are many, many reasons for that, but that's something to ponder. It's very different from what we've had here. Ian, I'll come to you next.
I was going to say, I'm not sure that it's like sort of a substitute for politics or lack of political engagement. I would say that it's more down to the way that we're taught. It's almost, you saw those people, and it was almost like they were fighting for food. It was almost like you'd expect riots in aid where aid is being delivered to a poor country or something like that. We've been raised by society to need these things, to want these things so desperately that they're a sign of they're how we view our worth. So therefore, people will think, as long as they think they're getting a bargain, people will fight for these things. We even saw like riots at IKEA a few years back. When they opened a new store, there wasn't even a sale on, but we saw these riots just because people wanted to be the first in to grab something and buy it and say they were there.
Yeah, but have you tried their meatballs?
Yes, I have, and they're delicious.
No, but good point. Thank you. David, you were nodding along quite vigorously to that.
Well, I think sometimes people you get caught up in the excitement. This thing was built up by the media. People are probably going to be having a hard Christmas financially, and they get excited by the fact that they can save some money, get caught up in the frenzy. But I think it's very, very important not to overstate the extent to which this happened. It wasn't every shop, was it? It was probably a few isolated incidents across the country, but I think part of it is the Americanization of British culture and of British popular culture, of this idea that we'll start celebrating Thanksgiving, we'll start celebrating Black Friday, we'll start importing all these things, and because the Americans do everything so much bigger than we ever could, we'll kind of get sucked into that. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, but then that's all completely opinion and could be completely wrong.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been quite... one time of the year that I can't stand is Halloween. Halloween has become this ridiculous thing where people... go to, children go around begging for sweets from houses. I mean, we had some this year who, many were very polite. We had a substantial number who complained about the sweets they were given at our door, and they were perfectly good. They were Haribo and things, and they were moaning about the type. Is that all you've got? Have you got anything that's not chewy? And I think that's a bit off. So I'm not a fan of Halloween personally. But I like your point about all these particular American customers coming over. Might not be a huge fan. Anything else wants to add on this, Thomas?
I've never heard such a load of rubbish in my whole life. But if you want to go out and get a bargain, then fair enough. You just need to do it in a civilised way, right? What you should be looking at is what idiots are fighting each other to get to the TVs. They're acting like idiots. It isn't the shop's fault. They put a sale on. That's the better for us that we can get more for our money. You shouldn't penalise the shop because they're passing on savings to us. You should penalise the idiots that are scrapping each other to get to the ridiculous. To think that you'd regulate the market like Germany, that's daft.
A few comments from our audience here. We've had, where are we? Charlie, who's at Charlie Chalkley, is telling us he always found it amusing that the day after Americans are thankful for what they've got, they go wild in the sales. And he then adds, I think there's a sense of pseudo-religious worship surrounding sales in the capitalist mainstream. I watched a BBC documentary discussing how Apple and other super brands act almost like religions. Will Bates at William Bates UK. Black Friday in America is very much a big event with insane discounts but very low stock. For example, $100 laptops. Adam Hawkes, as a capitalist, I think Black Friday is just clever marketing. I dare say not many people get a great deal overall. And Cameron S., Americanization is nothing but trouble. Halloween, Black Friday, odd handshakes. Okay. Anyone want to...
Back there.
Yeah, please, Matthew.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, just to say to Thomas that it makes it sound like the shops are kind of almost the innocent victims here. They know fully well what they are doing. They knew that this Black Friday was happening. If they'd have wanted to, they could have had, certainly the bigger shops, they could have had their shop security only allow so many people in at any one time, so they wouldn't have had the scenes that we saw. So the shops know what they're doing. They're not innocent. So that's the first point. The second one is just to kind of add another question to this topic is, when is enough enough? Okay, so when does having more things and yet more things and yet more things actually stop making you happy? And, you know, should we always aspire to yet more growth? You know, at what time do we actually say the planet only has so many resources, and that actually, you know, we've got to look after the natural environment a bit better, and which is, I know, broadening it out just a little bit, but you know, I think it flows from the same topic. So I'll just throw those in there.
Okay. Anyone want to respond to that?
Well, we live in a free world and a free market, and if I want to buy something, I should be allowed to buy it, not be forced not to.
I'm with John Mousey on this one. He says he refuses to celebrate Halloween. I knew you were a man of excellent taste, John. I'm very pleased that Pyro Annis, another of my favourite ones. This week he's Bar Humbug Pyro. I'm liking the name. Swedish Meatballs rock. You're absolutely right there. Although I'm fairly sure, can I stress at this point, I'm not sure I'd ever get into a fight over IKEA meatballs. But present me with a challenge and an opponent for the last piece of cheesecake, and you're probably on. All right, so just beware that one. And I think that's the... Oh no, Will Bates is here saying, we do not live in the Soviet Union. Shops don't have to ration who can get in. I don't know if anyone has seen that South Park episode about Black Friday at all. No, just me. Okay, I don't know if any of you watching have seen it, but one of my favourites. Adam Hawkes, responding to the point you've made, Matthew, enough is never enough. It may not make you happy, but it's never enough. And Charlie again, Black Friday is definitely a news generator. Reports of people scrapping in your store is a no news is bad news situation. That's almost certainly right, isn't it? And Cami Singh, of course, I'm not opposed to the idea of a steady state economy, but let's wait until the world's poorest nation has, and I've managed to read his first one before his second one's come up. So I'm doing well there, aren't I? Anyone want to comment on that issue about environmentalism and growth and whether or not it's important? No, you see, you killed a debate there, Matthew.
I'm sorry, it's just I thought we'd come to a kind of conclusion that Black Friday didn't have any stronger kind of political meaning, so I thought I'd move it on a bit.
Well, that's fine. Well, okay. So do you want to finish us off? Here we are. Oh yes, Cameron's last point there about to the last nation's living standards and GDP per capita are equivalent to Norway or Luxembourg. So we shouldn't be cutting off growth. After all, a lot of growth in developing countries, Matthew, comes from us, doesn't it? Because we are buying products that they have made for us. And if we start to cut off our growth, aren't the people who will actually suffer those in the developing world?
That's entirely true. And you know, certainly I'm a big believer in overseas aid, which I know we're not discussing. But I mean, in terms of Black Friday, I mean, whatever the cause of it was and whatever the motivation was, and I guess we don't really know because we'd have to ask those people who were engaged in it. I just felt it was a bit unedifying, really, and that, you know, there's no real reason to behave in that way. And that, as big a fan as I am of many things American, I'm not really a fan of that. So they can keep it. I don't really want to see it back next year.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go to our laser selection method now for our penultimate topic, and this one is going to be the one chosen by David.
Well, my suggestion is that instead of the current benefit system, which I think pretty much everyone would agree is a mess, we should replace it with a universal basic income. This would be payable to everybody who is a citizen of the UK, between the ages of 18 and death, and a half reduced rate paid for children, it would have numerous benefits and very few costs. So, for example, people wouldn't have to take the first job that they're offered. They would be able to move around careers. The labour market would become a lot more flexible. People would have the security of a constant stream of income. It wouldn't cost significantly more than the current benefit system. It would reduce disincentives to work more hours. It would also stop the trap whereby if you do work for more hours, you end up having a marginal tax rate of stupid percent. It would also, and I think this is a very important one, it would reduce the size of the government bureaucracy and the ability of places like HMRC and the Department for Work and Pensions to look into the private lives of people. It would be very hard to play the system, and it will be so simplistic everyone can understand it. There's a few things that you do to pay for it. You would have a income tax of around 30 to 35% on all earnings, with no minimum threshold, because everybody effectively has a tax-free minimum threshold provided by this. And I can't see a downside in any of the studies that I've looked at about this policy. I think it would revolutionise welfare, labour market, and just people's general happiness in the country.
David, can I ask, has this been implemented anywhere? I think the Swiss recently voted on it, didn't they?
They voted on a referendum, and sadly enough, I don't actually know the result, to give a certain amount of money to each person. It's never been implemented on a national scale, but there was talk about it from, obviously, it's an idea that resonates with the left, but people like Nixon and a lot of Republicans in the 1970s were articulating and advocating for this. Hayek was a fan, but he preferred a top-up job tax, kind of reverse tax, and although it's not being done anywhere, there have been a fair few studies in regions that have shown none of the side effects that you would expect of a basic income, but all the benefits.
Okay, thank you. We've had a question on this so far, just to confirm, and David, I'm sure you can nod if I'm right here. Cameron S. is asking, would everyone get this payments, like even if you're working? I think the answer is yes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it would sort of replace the tax-free allowance, because everyone would pay tax on their earnings, and you wouldn't get a tax-free allowance, but you would get this. It's a sort of rebate in a sense.
Yeah, essentially, and there's literally no conditions along the fact that you're a British citizen.
Okay. Will Bates has commented, what about EU citizens on the universal income plan? He says it will be totally illegal under EU rules. I don't know if you're able to add anything else to that, Will. And I don't know if anyone else wants to join in at this point. I mean, it's not something I know a lot about, but I don't know if anyone's got a sort of an instant reaction, gut views, or knowledge about it.
I think that... Yeah, I think with this, I'm actually in very much agreement that it really simplifies things quite a bit, because you can get rid of state pensions, because if once you get over 18, you start earning this basic wage or this basic national minimum income, or whatever. It gets rid of most benefits that we need to deliver. It reduces Westminster. The question is about funding. I mean, we would have to tax a little bit more. We would have to make people, or get people to accept that. The EU, I don't know anything about in terms of whether it would be legal or not, or whether we would have to treat EU citizens who came to live here the same. Possibly we would under EU laws. But my sort of general thing is that it does free up the labour market. It does make a proper... you can get rid of the minimum wage. You no longer need the minimum wage, and so therefore employers can be free to pay whatever they want, because if you're in the lower end jobs, you can turn around and walk away, and you're not worried about where your income's coming from, whether the state's going to be 6 weeks behind on paying you, whether you're going to be in arrears because of various other things that's happening with the benefit system that we have at the moment. So it really does, it liberates people, and it also liberates the market, as far as I'm concerned.
It doesn't liberate the market, and it certainly doesn't. it might liberate lazy people, because all it'll do is create a culture of people that can walk away from a job knowing that they don't have to work for their money. So I can't see how that would work at all. It's just, this sounds... Putting tax rates up, for a start, is probably one of the most unpopular things you could go around, especially to 35%. Does that include national insurance, you know? So they'd have to pay, like, in terms of total amount of taxation, 46%. That just doesn't seem viable to me whatsoever. The way to get people into work is to cut taxes and enable more small and medium businesses to be able to employ people. So cut their national insurance contributions, cut their taxes. Now, in terms of benefit, the best way to do it is have in-work benefits. That if you are under this supposing living wage, that you put their benefit on top of that to help them, compete. But having just a basic allowance for everyone will just stop people working.
Matthew, we've not heard from you so far. Can I ask you to say something? Then I'll come in with what some more people have said, and then I'll ask for more comments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a great deal about it, is the honest answer. I mean, it doesn't sound like an unreasonable idea to me, but I guess I'd ask, if it was as simple as that, why has no one done it? Why has no one in this country done it?
David, I don't know on that particular point, why hasn't it been done before? We've had another comment. I mean, Cameron S says, why does this sound so perfect? What's the catch with this? I'm so confused.
The catch is, a lot of the ideas, like Thomas was saying, it sounds wrong. It sounds giving money to people who don't work it doesn't sound fair. But the thing is, and basically every study that I've seen confirms this, is that people do work fewer hours than they would have done otherwise, but not a significant amount. And for people like, say, my age, or people who are in high school, how American, sixth form, the time that they take away from work, they put into their education. So all the benefits, it does seem like a perfect policy, but it's that gut feeling that giving money to people who aren't working is wrong. But that's part of that might, for you, that might be really bad, but for me, that con is completely outweighed by all of the positives. And I mean, we've talked about
what would that send out to, like, in this world that we're a globalized world now, and we have businesses from abroad applying here. How would that work? These big businesses, or not even just big businesses, but people trading abroad. Why would they want to come here, trade here, and employ people here when they can just walk out of their job and be guaranteed an income? It will just create a culture of laziness.
Well, presumably the level of income is so low as to be not something that people would want to or be able to live on too easily. Well, and I'm assuming, David, we're not talking like 10 or 15 grand a year.
No, we're talking about, and citizensincome.org have done some excellent work on this. We're talking about maybe £60 to £80 a week. So by no means lavish, and this doesn't include, they've not included housing benefit in their costings, but the current cost of benefit in 2012 to 2013 was £272 billion. The cost of the benefits that I'm proposing to replace with this basic income, and the cost of the scheme would be £276 billion, which is £4 billion more a year. So that's the cost. That is assuming a 32% income tax, which has international insurance included in that. So that's 32. That's it. That's the rate. No hidden rate.
Are you taking into consideration like potential loss of tax receipts due to people not wanting to do business here because people just will not work? Why would they go to work if they're guaranteed an income? Why would they work if they weren't guaranteed an income with doing nothing? The fact is they wouldn't.
The income, first of all, some people enjoy their jobs. Second of all, the amount of money that you will get through the scheme is, like Gareth said, it's not enough to live comfortably on. You can survive. That's all it aims to do. So if I want to have an iPhone, if I want some new books, if I want to do anything, I'm going to probably need to get a job. And you say about people can just walk away with impunity. Well, yeah, okay, you could do, but I can walk away from a job now. It just means that I'd be a hell of a lot poorer if I did. And if you see someone's CV and they've done 10 different jobs in the last 2 or 3 years, they're not going to get hired. It just means that, like we were saying before, the businesses have to make the positions more attractive to the workers, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, let me go over some of the comments that people have said, and then I'll come back to you all, because there've been a lot of comments on this in the last couple of minutes. To go back to here we are, Charlie Chalky saying that I think it's a great idea, but many upper classes will probably be angry to be, quote, paying for others to live. Liam Bones has said to him, well, they already pay for others to live, and so it's nice to see these discussions going on here. And Charlie says, well, I do agree that's a problem, but maybe a basic income would help reduce the stigma of people that actually rely on benefits. John Mousley and Will Bates have been talking a lot about the impact of the EU and whether or not it means it would have to be paid to any EU citizen who could come here. I know that the recent case at the ECJ meant that it was reinforcing the freedom of movement issue in terms of people being able to claim benefits only if they are actively seeking work or in work, not just to come and claim. And that was a case of a Romanian woman in Germany. And although it didn't mean that benefit tourism was completely stamped out, it did mean that you couldn't just go somewhere for benefits anymore. But it is an interesting point to see, because this isn't like a benefit anymore, is it? It's something different. Cami Singh is telling us that Milton Friedman preferred a negative income tax, which reduces proportionate to earned income, and unlike a citizen's income, it doesn't subsidise the rich. So we're getting a bit of a flavour of comments there. Ian, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to go on to the idea that companies wouldn't want to come and work here, but the point is that you've potentially reduced their wage bills, because there's no longer now a minimum wage for people to come in and do the cheaper end jobs. If you want to run a call center, why do you want to run a call center in India when there's communication problems, time lag, things like that, when you could open a new call center over here for a lower rate than minimum wage, and people, if they want to earn money, if they want to have more than just the very basics that the state can provide them to live on, then they'll go there and work there, and you're not penalising people who take jobs, take temporary jobs. It can take weeks for the state to catch back up once they sign back onto the dole or the job seekers allowance. It can take weeks for the state paperwork to catch back up. They don't have that problem anymore because they're always earning. They've always got that to fall back on. They can take a temporary job and do it because it doesn't hurt them. They're always benefiting from taking that job.
Sounds like communist nonsense to me, if I'm honest with you.
Okay, any other comments before I ask David to close this?
Yeah, Gareth, I was just going to say, and I know this is a little bit party political, but ultimately this is a political programme, isn't it? That I was just going to say that, you know, paying people who are lazy are a bit like paying UKIP's MEPs to not turn up and vote in the European Parliament.
Thomas? It's only fair.
West Midlands MEPs. Jill Seymour, 73% turnout at the European Parliament, missed one voting session, or one day of one voting session. Jim Carver's ranked in the highest 10 MEPs in the country, and the top 20 in the whole of the EU. So that's an old argument. It may have been true in the past, but it certainly isn't true anymore.
Thank you very much indeed. We're going to go to our final topic in a few moments after I've asked David to close, and it will, of course, just to prove the laser selection process was fair, it will be Ian's topic. We're going to close, by the way, today with your favourite Churchill quote. That'll be the last thing we do. But David, can you close on this particular topic about a basic income, please?
Yeah. Just first, I'd like to address the in-work benefits alternative, and the problem is that just reinforces inequalities in society, whereas this takes a lot of people together out of this kind of like relative poverty line, and it seems fairer for everyone. But yeah, I think that the universal basic income is a really powerful policy tool that has the potential to do a lot of good for British economy and British society. The only problem is a lack of political will, because the problems aren't feasibility and aren't outcomes. It's just this refusal by the political elite to look at fact-based policy making, and that's a shame.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you to all of you who commented on that. We're going to be going to our final major topic of the night now. By the way, if any of you do have a single question, a quick one, or even a silly challenge you want to put to all of our guests, tweet us and let us know, because it's always nice to break these things up a touch. But our final topic is going to be opened by Ian.
Hi. Reform of the House of Lords. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've actually noticed that the Lords quite often have protected us from the worst excesses of our own elected parliaments. They rejected 42-day. They rejected the bill on 42-day detention, for example, and they've done a few things. They've rejected bills where they feel that they can do that, whereas other bills have gone through with cross-party support, and as the second house, they don't feel that they've got any kind of mandate to prevent any bills from going through, so therefore they let other bills through with less scrutiny, or potentially less scrutiny. And so there's been a large call, and it was in the manifestos for 2010, was it? All major parties had reform of the House of Lords to have a partially elected House of Lords. But how do we elect them? We can't elect them on the same basis as we elect Parliament, because we just end up with something that was with sort of a rubber stamp on things, if that's what the best way to put it, where they just vote the same way as the party voted in Parliament. So I'd like to try something different, where you elected people based on having specific responsibilities. So each region would elect people in terms of education, health, tax, work and pensions, constitution, maybe foreign affairs, so that you would have different groups within the upper house that would be responsible for providing scrutiny for specific areas. And for me, most bills affect more than one area, so therefore you rarely have anything that doesn't affect taxation, or how much money is being spent, or there's always a constitutional aspect to it. And it would be just interesting to see whether the debate would change if they were elected to have these very specific and very accountable responsibilities.
Thank you very much, Ian. In one sense, that's not unlike elections they have at state level in America, is it state and under, because they do there elect people, they elect judges, they elect people with specific responsibilities for education boards and that kind of thing. But you're talking about it on having a sort of a national scale, aren't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's a national. The Commons would still be providing the laws, but the more in-depth scrutiny could be provided by the House of Lords with people elected on a mandate to scrutinise in that area.
A house of specialists.
Yeah.
Okay, so guests and viewers at home, we have two topics here. We've got the specific idea about a House of Elected Specialists, and we've got House of Lords reform in general. What's your view on it? Does it need to be reformed? If so, how? And what do you think of this idea from Ian? Who'd like to start on this one?
I'll give it a go.
Off you go.
Right. In terms of electing based on specialism, I just don't think it'd work in practice, although I kind of see his point that it'd be good to have electing people that actually know their brief for once, but I just don't think it would work because people will just stick to the party political aspect to it. In terms of an elected House of Lords, I think there is definitely an argument and a case for it, but something needs to change because the current system of parties just ramming the House of Lords full of people when they're in charge of their best mates from Westminster is just absolutely wrong. Could you do something on proportional representation based on counties? Possibly. But I think it opens up a massive wider debate in terms of full constitutional reform.
Thank you very much. Matthew, your party has led on House of Lords reform in this Parliament, and it was Nick Clegg's bill that went forward. What's your view on Ian's specific idea and the topic in general?
I certainly think that, no surprise to hear me say this, that we should have a wholly elected House of Lords, and that we could have had that had the other parties backed it. And it's ironical now that Labour have decided to be all pro House of Lords reform, and of course they could have ensured that it happened in this Parliament, so that rather sticks in the throat. In terms of the idea proposed, I mean, they do try and put people in the House of Lords at the moment. Well, some of them are people who are kind of given a reward for no longer being MPs or councillors, so I appreciate that, but at least part of the laws, they do try and put people in there who have certain skills, albeit that they have no mandate, of course, whatsoever to be doing the job. So I'd have no particular problem with that, but for me, I just want to see them elected. Beyond that, I'm happy for a debate to happen, really.
Thank you very much indeed. A few points that people have made on Twitter so far. Do excuse me. We've had Liam Bones is telling us, shouldn't it be a fully elected House, as Labour suggests, a Senate? Not often I agree with them, but it's a sensible way to do it. Adam Hawkes, the Lords are experts in their areas. Get rid of them and you could have idiots making decisions, like another House of Commons. We've had Will Bates making the point it depends what you want an upper chamber for in terms of how you reform it. And where are we? Yes, Silesh Patel here. Wouldn't that just, who's at _Silesh_Patel_, wouldn't that just lead to a form of political deadlock like with Obama and Congress? And that's in terms of having an elected House. And my favourite one so far, I think, comes from Coco at Devi Kinja. Andrew, Rudolph, Alfred. I'm not sure precisely what that's in relation to, but I thought I'd read it out on air anyway, and thank you very much, Coco, for that comment. David?
Yeah, I think the current system that we have now, for me, I think it best fits the job. It's, like you just said, you do need to know what is the aim of the Lords before you reform. You don't reform and then try and attach an aim to it afterwards. And I think it is to scrutinise and bring expertise to bills and to Parliament itself, because you can't expect MPs to be experts at everything or anything. So you need these Lords to be doing this. What I'd like to see is the number of Lords cut for 300, 400, and people who are appointed to have their appointments justified. So for basically a letter or their CV, put right, this is why they are an expert in their field of tax, science, whatever. Not their CV as being an MP for the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, whatever. It should end as a form of political patronage and as essentially a pension for washed up MPs, and it should become a real inspirational chamber of people who know their stuff.
But David, these people should have a mandate, should they not?
Yeah, they do. They're appointed by elected representatives.
Well,
no, that's technocracy. That's just ramming it full of technocrats. It'll always be a job for the boys.
No, because a technocratic system is where these people make decisions. Now, in the system,
they do now.
The system we have,
legislation.
Yeah, but they're all subject to approval by the Commons. So I fail to see why.
Well, that is technocracy.
Gareth, can I just come in there, David? That is not a democratic system. Them being appointed by people who are elected does not give them a mandate. And
absolutely.
For me, these people should be elected. Now, I know the argument against that from some people is that, well, won't there be a clash in terms of power with the Commons? I think there's a way around that. Is if you make the because they have this in Australia, I believe, with their system, that they make the terms for the upper chamber longer, and they have a specific role for scrutiny, so that ultimately they're not clashing with the people who are doing the main work, which is the the House of Representatives in Australia or the Commons here. So I don't think you necessarily have to have a clash, as some people suggest. But for me, peers currently being appointed by members of the House of Commons does not give the peers themselves a mandate.
I would like to just argue, when people say that we should, or maybe just have PR or something like that, what I don't like is the fact that you end up sort of voting en bloc for a party, whereas people's political views are slightly varying when it comes to various different issues. So if you allowed each region to vote for people in each of these areas, and those specific people, it would allow them to vote for the specific ideas that they might like. They may, for example, be very pro state-run NHS, but may be fairly neoliberal, and for the rest of everything else, they may want to sort of fine-tune how they vote for MPs versus how they vote for the upper house, would actually allow them to sort of have more control and feel more engaged with what they're doing.
Okay, we've got thank you for this so far. We've got a load of comments on this coming in. Let me read you a few here. Alicia at Upon a Cloud is saying the House of Lords should be hereditary only. Not that I'm against people appointed Lord. Lord Chatham was a very good thing, but yes. We've had Andrew Crawford at Andy Crayfish. I think the idea for an elected House of Specialists would be a great idea. The current system is archaic. Edward Reach at ReachEd, are peers with no mandates different to co-opted councillors? Robin is missing Lily. I'm sure we'll have Lily back on soon. And then, again, loads of comments on here. Big debate going on between Liam and Silesh and Joseph. Joseph is putting forward the point that we could just abolish the House of Lords, particularly if it doesn't actually hold too many powers. Cami Singh is saying best way to ensure an informed independent Senate is longer terms, term limits, and maybe reserve non-partisan mandates. Silesh, particularly the Commons is the Commons, whilst the Lords is for merit appointments, i.e. expertise in specialist areas. Lots and lots of comments from all sorts of different points of view here. Where are we? Yes, in terms of my own point of view, I mean, I took part in the original 1999 review of the House of Lords when the proposals were put out to a Royal Commission, the Wakeham Commission, and I proposed that it should be 1/3 elected, 1/3 appointed by the House of Commons after an election, and 1/3 independently appointed. Obviously, no one on earth took that proposal seriously, but my name does appear at about page 400 of the report. Which is nice. But personally, I would rather have a Lords that was at least majority elected. How you do it is frankly less relevant from my point of view. But I do think there's something inherently wrong with having half of our Parliament, over half if you count them by numbers, who are appointed and they're not elected. And of those, the overwhelming majority have been appointed by about 4 people. They've been appointed by four or five prime ministers and leaders of the opposition, and that can't be right, surely.
Well, no, it can't, and it isn't. I mean, it makes a mockery of us being a proper democracy in the 21st century. Having said that, so does having a non-elected monarch. But
you've had that one, Matthew. Behave yourself. Don't push it. I wonder. Here's a quick quiz for you all. The UK is one of only 2 countries on earth that has reserved places for representatives of the official state religion in its parliament. Can anyone guess the other?
Iran.
Iran, yes. Who said that?
That was David.
That was David. You see, 10 points to Dave there. Yeah, Iran, and I think that also is a little bit. I think that's a little bit. I mean, archaic doesn't really cover it. I think that's a quite bizarre thing that we have representatives of one particular branch of one religion, albeit the state religion, in our parliament by right, able to vote on things and able to instigate laws and vote on laws. But that, again, is just my view, and my view are just one of many that are available, including on this panel here. Anyone else want to come in at this point?
Yeah, can I just say, we're talking about jobs for the boys, or it's the 21st century, or girls, and I don't see how that's very different from a PR system where if your party can ensure you're put on a list, you're safe. If you're number 1 on that list, you have got a job for life. So where's
you could have different terms. You could have different, like, you don't have to be a Lord for life.
Exactly.
You could be for 10 years, 20 years. Also, that if you are in a democratic party, then they wouldn't be just put onto these lists. You know, you'd vote them on as members of that party, etc. Or you have open primaries. You don't need to, sorry to use it, do the Labour approach and you're a woman, you can go on top of the list. You know, in democratic parties, the members choose who go on them.
Adam Hall.
Would you not think
Sorry,
just
go on,
encourage? Go on.
No,
I was going to say, do you not think it would encourage inter-party like posturing, extremism, and short-termism if they're just focused on winning over their members on this list? Whereas what you're doing then is you're stacking the upper house.
Well, how do you think it works for any elected representative?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, David. David is representing the only party that regularly holds open caucuses, as they should probably be called, for its parliamentary candidates.
How did that work out in Rochester and Strood?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you're going to win every
people.
election. Doesn't mean you're going to win every. Oh no, there were several thousand people who elected the Conservative candidate in Rochester and Strood. That was a postal primary, and they have meetings where you have hundreds and hundreds of members of the public turn up to select the candidate, often in our safer seats because we recognise people should have more of a say there. And the Conservative Party is the only party that does that allows the public to choose its candidates.
Well, of course, anyone can join political parties, Gareth.
Yeah, but some people want to say, but they don't want to join. And why should they have to give you money to select your candidate?
But then why have members of political parties?
Good point.
Because some people do want to pay, and some people do want to give their time and money, if they have any.
Yes, but David, that's right. But one of the few things that are kind of bog standard, for want of a better phrase, a member of any political party gets to do for that money is to be able to choose their candidate.
And that doesn't seem to have been very successful in tackling things like declining turnout and voter apathy. So perhaps it's time for a new way.
That's very true. It's worth noting, Thomas, I don't know if you might want to answer this point, because one of the people who was particularly passionate about having proper open primaries, or at least open caucuses to select parliamentary candidates, was Douglas Carswell. My understanding is that Douglas didn't have one of those when he was selected as the UKIP candidate for Clacton. I wonder if you know why that is.
Well, in terms of in our written constitution, which was voted through 5% of our membership, as a result of the by-election, our National Executive Committee, which is also elected, gets to choose the candidate. However, for him to run again next year, he has to go through the full hustings procedure.
And is that of your members, or is it of the public?
Well, that'd be members.
Okay.
But I'm not against open primaries. I am not against open primaries.
Thomas, on that, what happened to the guy who had been the UKIP candidate?
Well, in Clacton, he threw a wobbly.
Well, wouldn't you?
In Rochester and Strood, he stood down gracefully.
Wouldn't you throw a wobbly, Thomas?
No, because I'm not selfish.
What kind of a nonsense answer is that? That guy had no doubt been selected, had he not, as the candidate for Clacton, for UKIP, right?
Yeah.
Right, had gone through this process that you're defending, but then because, and no doubt you wanted him to win and become the next MP for Clacton, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but because the Tory MP decided to defect, then forget your democratic processes. Forget that this guy had been selected. Never mind that. We don't need you anymore. The MP has changed parties. What a mockery of a democracy.
Well, you're asking for my personal opinion, and my personal opinion is I'd want UKIP to win in that seat. And when Douglas Carswell came over, he had a huge more chance of that local candidate getting in.
So democracy doesn't matter if the party's going to benefit.
No. That's not what I said at all, David.
I know.
That's not what I said.
I'm just digging. Let me give you a few more comments that people have made here. Now, Adam Hawkes, and I've retweeted these, has indicated that those people who are currently appointed to the House of Lords by the Appointments Committee, those dreadfully named People's Peers, but we'll leave the whole Blair People's thing to one side. But he's tweeted the document that proves they are supposed to be non-partisan. He then also goes on to mention that should hereditary peerages be reintroduced, a member of his family would get a seat back in the House of Lords, but that's unrelated to his point on it. And you see, now I don't want to say her name again, but Alessia at Upon a Cloud is thanking me for always reading her name correctly without having been told. I hope I said it again. Now I'm worried I'm saying it incorrectly. Will Bates is asking, should UKIP get more peers? John Mousley responds, yes, that's not your job, John, that's their job. So you four, tell me. Ian, we've not been to you in a while, and it's been your topic. I mean, at this point in time, before we get to the issue of reforming, would it be fair for UKIP to get more peers in the House of Lords?
I think if they were voted for, then yes. I mean, personally, I would think about the idea of retaining the concept of peers should be apolitical in terms of they should not have any party affiliations. I would not have an upper house that was able to be whipped into voting with the current government or along party lines. But that's my view.
good luck in finding people that don't have any kind of party political view at all. Good luck.
Not party political views, but party political. They couldn't be members. Or they would have to give up their membership of a party.
They still have that view and still group together and vote.
They can still group together. They can still group together, but what causes people to be whipped at the moment? Why do MPs rebel and things like that? Is that the whip uses their influence and power and coercion to force people to vote in their way, and that the party will reward them with a ministerial position or something like that later.
But Ian,
so we would.
But Ian, that's how parties that are elected into government ensure that their programme, which the people have voted for, gets through.
If the House of Lords is about scrutiny, then it's not about. Then the House of Lords is purely about scrutiny. Then it's not about voting along party lines. It's about giving the best possible scrutiny to the bills that's going through.
Matthew, didn't Nick Clegg's bill try to reduce that? Because the issue here really is the power of the whips. And didn't Nick Clegg's bill try to reduce that by making sure that peers had a long term that they couldn't renew? So they would be elected for 15 years and they couldn't stand for election again. Because isn't the issue over whip saying if you don't keep voting with us, you're not going to get reselected and you're going to lose your seat and you're going to be out of a job next time? If there's no chance of you standing and you're in for 15 years anyway, isn't that entirely the point that Ian's basically making that your party proposed?
Yes, I have no problem with peers being that bit more independent. I was just making the point that certainly, in the Commons, obviously whipping is needed for governments to be able to get their legislation through.
Okay, any more comments on this one?
UKIP doesn't have a whip.
Yeah, well, that's because you're not really in anything at the moment. I'm sure you will.
Can I just ask Thomas? So a bit by the by, but how long before one or other of your MPs tries to take the leadership? How long? Go on, tell me.
How long do you think before one of our MPs take the leadership?
Yeah, go on.
No. If they tried, no one would vote for them because Nigel is so popular. But if they try, then we've just had a leadership was open and only Nigel applied for it. If they go for it, then I'll still be voting for Nigel. But good luck to him.
Okay, thank you very much indeed on that score. Now it's time for your favourite Churchill quotes. I'm going to start, and it's not so much a quote, but it's more a story which I hope isn't apocryphal. That Churchill was in the gentlemen's toilets in the Commons at one point, and Clement Attlee, his deputy, came in, and I think this was after the 45 election, actually. So by this time, Churchill was the leader of the opposition, and as Clement Attlee came in, Churchill moved to the far end of the urinals. And Clement said, "What's the matter, Winston? Or why don't?" He said, "Well," he said, "when a socialist sees something strong, powerful, and successful, he always tries to grab it for himself." And that would be my favourite Churchill quote. Anyone else?
Yes, I've got mine.
Yeah, I'll go for mine.
Matthew?
Thank you. So mine, this was from a speech he made to the academic youth held at the University of Zurich in 1946. And this one's just for Thomas. He said, "There is a remedy which would, in a few years, make all Europe free and happy. It is to recreate the European family, or as much of it as we can, and to provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace, in safety and freedom. We must," he said, build a kind of United States of Europe."
There'll be some arguments over
Right,
that
let
one.
me respond with that.
Thomas?
Respond to that.
Go on.
Right. If Britain must choose between Europe and the open sea, she must always choose the open sea. But that's not my favourite quote. My favourite quote is, "The truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may derive it, but in the end, there it is."
Thank you.
So that's just a response to his point.
David?
I had trouble with this because he was such a sassy minx, wasn't he? No, I think it's either when he said to Lady Astor, if she said to him, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your tea," and he said, "If I were your husband, I'd drink it," or being told that, "Must you fall asleep when I'm speaking?" and then Churchill replies, "No, it's entirely voluntary."
Brilliant. And I'm afraid I've committed a terrible sin here. Ian, I didn't come back to you to close the topic on the House of Lords. So would you like to give us your favourite Churchill quote, then close the topic on the House of Lords, please?
I think I was going to go with something like, "Success is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm." And that is, that describes a lot of politics, to be fair. in general, in closing up with the House of Lords, I just wanted to put a different style of House of Lords out there. There's lots of people who've advocated just going down PR or other kinds of routes like that, but I just wanted to say, like, almost an elected House of Technocrats may be better than just going down party lines again and just going down the same old route.
Yeah, technocrats works really well in Europe.
Thank you very much indeed. A couple of our Churchill comments that people have tweeted here. Robin at Miss Robin Alice, I may be drunk, miss, but in the morning I'll be sober and you will still be ugly. Gavin at Blue Liberal 1, on Clement Attlee, a modest man with much to be modest about. Adam Hawkes, his favourite Churchill quote, anyone can cross the floor, but it takes a real rat to cross back. Of course, Churchill back and forth. Some rather good ones there. Thank you. Thank you all very much indeed at home for your comments, for your tweets, for the wonderful debates that have been going on. I've done my best to pass on as many of your comments. I'm sorry for those that I didn't or those whom I missed. Thank you very much, my guests here. You make the show, and I'm very grateful for your time in doing so. We would all very much welcome you at home appearing down here. It's remarkably simple. If you'd like to, next week or in future, get in touch. I have a waiting list for a couple of parties, but not for most. There's always plenty of space. I can have theoretically up to 9 people down here. That might be a little more than I would want, but if you'd like to, get in touch. It's really simple to do. And has it been fun?
Yeah, it's good.
You'll note that instant reaction there. that proves it beyond doubt. So thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Thank you at home. We will be back again next weekend for Spectrum Debate number 7, and we'll hopefully see you then. Good night.